January 27th, 1945. Auschwitz-Birkenau, occupied Poland. Soviet Lieutenant Anatoly Shapiro pushed open the wooden door of Barracks 14 and stumbled backward, hand covering his mouth against the stench. Inside, over 400 living skeletons stared at him with eyes that had witnessed systematic murder on a scale that defied human comprehension. The veteran of Stalingrad and Kursk, a man who had seen warfare's worst horrors, found himself unable to speak. He would later write in his official report, "I have fought across 1,000 kilometers of devastated landscape. I have seen mass graves and burned villages. Nothing prepared me for what the Germans built at Auschwitz. This was not war. This was industrialized extermination designed with the precision of a factory production line." Among the survivors was Dr. Gisela Perl, a Hungarian Jewish gynecologist who had worked in the camp's medical barracks. She approached Shapiro and spoke the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "You are too late. The murder factory operated for nearly 3 years. Over 1 million people were killed here with efficiency that would impress any industrial engineer. The Germans transformed death into a standardized process with quotas, schedules, and quality control procedures. They succeeded beyond their architects' expectations. The liberation of Auschwitz revealed the endpoint of a systematic program that began not with hatred alone, but with bureaucratic planning, technological innovation, and organizational methods borrowed from modern industrial production. The mathematics of genocide were written not in military tactics, but in capacity calculations, throughput optimization, and elimination of operational bottlenecks that allowed the murder of approximately 1.1 million human beings at a single location. The transformation of a former Polish military barracks into history's most efficient killing center represented the ultimate perversion of industrial modernity, applied to mass murder. The origins of this catastrophe reached back 3 years earlier, to a moment when Nazi leadership confronted a problem their ideology created, but their existing methods could not solve. January the 20th, 1942, Wannsee, Berlin. 15 senior Nazi officials gathered around a conference table in a villa overlooking Lake Wannsee. SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, chief of the Reich Security Main Office, presented what he termed the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe. The minutes of the meeting, recorded by Adolf Eichmann, revealed bureaucratic language masking genocidal intent. Heydrich outlined the problem with clinical precision. Nazi Germany controlled territory containing approximately 11 million Jews. Existing elimination methods, mass shootings by mobile killing units, had proven psychologically damaging to German personnel and operationally inefficient. SS Gruppenführer Otto Ohlendorf, who commanded Einsatzgruppe D in Ukraine, had reported that his men suffered severe psychological trauma from face-to-face killings. The murder rate, approximately 90,000 killed over 17 months, was deemed insufficient for Nazi leadership's genocidal ambitions. The meeting at Wannsee established that evacuation to the east meant systematic murder, but the operational methods remained undefined. Over the following months, Nazi officials would develop solutions that transformed genocide from brutal violence into industrialized process. The architects of murder, from euthanasia to genocide. The technology and organizational structure that would make Auschwitz efficient emerged from earlier Nazi programs that had nothing to do with Jews initially. The T4 euthanasia program, initiated in October 1939, targeted Germans with mental and physical disabilities deemed life unworthy of life. The program's administrators developed the first systematic use of poison gas for mass murder. At facilities like Hadamar and Hartheim, victims entered rooms disguised as showers. Carbon monoxide from diesel engines or bottled carbon monoxide killed them within 20 minutes. Bodies were cremated in specially designed ovens that could process multiple corpses simultaneously. Christian Worth, a criminal police officer who supervised T4 killing centers, pioneered operational procedures that would later be adapted for extermination camps. His innovations included deceptive processing that kept victims calm until the final moment, standardized killing procedures that reduced variation, and efficient body disposal systems that eliminated bottlenecks. By August 1941, when Hitler officially halted T4 after public protests and religious opposition, the program had murdered approximately 70,000 people. But the operational knowledge, the technology, and the personnel trained in industrial-scale killing remained available for new applications. Rudolf Höss, who would become Auschwitz commandant, understood the significance of T4's methods. In testimony recorded during his war crimes trial in 1946, he explained, "The euthanasia program proved that mass murder could be executed systematically with limited personnel if properly organized. The key insights were deception to maintain victim cooperation, gas to eliminate psychological burden on killers, and cremation capacity to match killing capacity. These principles guided Auschwitz construction and operations. The expansion from concentration camp to extermination center. Auschwitz began in June 1940 as a conventional concentration camp designed to hold Polish political prisoners. The initial facility, later designated Auschwitz I, could house approximately 10,000 inmates in brick barracks originally built for the Polish army. The transformation into an extermination center occurred in stages driven by Nazi Germany's evolving genocidal ambitions. In March 1941, Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, visited Auschwitz and ordered massive expansion. The camp would serve multiple purposes: a concentration camp for enemies of the Reich, a labor camp exploiting prisoner work for German industry, and, though not yet explicitly stated, a potential killing center. The catalyst for Auschwitz's final transformation came from the Eastern Front. Operation Barbarossa, launched June 22, 1941, placed millions of Soviet citizens under German control, including vast Jewish populations. Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units, followed the Wehrmacht, murdering Jews through mass shootings. But this method, while brutal, could not achieve the scale Nazi leadership demanded. SS Sturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann, who coordinated Jewish deportations, conducted capacity analyses in late 1941. His calculations revealed that existing killing methods could not murder European Jewry within any reasonable time frame. Germany needed a solution that could process thousands daily rather than hundreds. Auschwitz's location made it ideal for this purpose. Situated in occupied Poland near the junction of multiple rail lines, it offered transportation access from across German-controlled Europe. The surrounding area was sparsely populated, reducing witnesses to operations. Existing infrastructure could be expanded rapidly using prisoner labor. In September 1941, Höss authorized the first experimental gassing at Auschwitz. Approximately 600 Soviet prisoners of war and 250 sick Polish inmates were locked in the basement of Block 11. Zyklon B, a hydrogen cyanide-based pesticide used for delousing, was introduced through openings in the ceiling. Within minutes, all victims were dead. The experiment proved that Zyklon B killed faster and more reliably than carbon monoxide while requiring minimal equipment. Höss recognized immediately that he had discovered the technology that would make industrial-scale murder possible. He later testified, "The gassing reassured me since we would soon have to begin the mass extermination of the Jews, and neither Himmler nor I was certain how this was to be carried out. A gas would save us from needing mass shootings of women and children. We now had the means to execute the Führer's order. The construction, designing a murder factory, In October 1941, construction began on Auschwitz II Birkenau, a massive expansion 3 kilometers from the original camp. The design specifications revealed Nazi leadership's murderous intentions even before explicit extermination orders were issued. Birkenau would eventually comprise over 300 buildings spread across 425 acres. Unlike Auschwitz II with its permanent brick structures, Birkenau consisted primarily of wooden barracks, originally designed as horse stables for the German army. Each barrack, measuring 40 meters by 8 meters, was intended to house 52 horses. At Birkenau, these structures held 400 to 500 prisoners in conditions that made survival impossible for most inmates. But the most revealing aspect of Birkenau's design was infrastructure that served no purpose for a labor or concentration camp. Railroad tracks extended directly into the camp, terminating at a ramp where selections would occur. Underground rooms designated as corpse cellars in construction documents were sized to hold hundreds of bodies. Crematorium capacity far exceeded any legitimate need for a facility supposedly housing prisoners. Engineer Walter de Jaco and architect Fritz Ertl, who designed Birkenau's expansion, created plans for 4 killing facilities designated Crematorium 2, 3, 4, and V. The designs integrated all stages of the murder process: undressing rooms, gas chambers disguised as showers, elevator systems to move corpses to cremation ovens, and ventilation systems to remove poison gas. The efficiency of the design revealed intimate understanding of industrial processes. Crematorium 2 and 3, the largest facilities, could theoretically process 440 corpses every 24 hours each. The gas chambers could hold approximately 1,000 people. Victims would undress in a room designed to appear like a community bathing facility. They would proceed through a corridor to the gas chamber, also disguised as a shower room with fake fixtures. After gassing, the ventilation system would clear the gas, allowing Sonderkommando prisoners to remove corpses via elevator to cremation ovens above. The entire process, from arrival to cremation, could theoretically be completed in less than 2 hours with proper coordination. Otto Moll, SS officer who supervised crematorium operations, described the system's efficiency in testimony captured during interrogation in 1945. The design eliminated all bottlenecks. Victims moved through the facility like products on an assembly line. Each stage fed directly to the next. When operations ran smoothly, we could process an entire transport from arrival to cremation before the next transport arrived. It was precisely organized murder on an industrial scale. The deception, operational psychology of mass and murder. Perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated aspect of Auschwitz operations was the systematic deception that kept victims calm and cooperative until the moment of death. Nazi planners understood that panic would create operational problems, crowds becoming uncontrollable, requiring force that would slow processing and traumatize German personnel. The deception began at deportation points across Europe. Jews selected for Auschwitz were told they were being resettled to labor camps in the East. They were encouraged to bring luggage, valuables, and practical items they would need for their new lives. This fiction maintained order during roundups and prevented desperate resistance. Upon arrival at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the deception continued with theatrical precision. SS guards directed people off trains onto the selection ramp, a platform designed to appear like a normal railroad station. People deemed fit for labor were separated from those selected for immediate murder, the elderly, children, mothers with infants, and anyone appearing weak or sick. Those selected for death were told they would shower and be deloused before receiving work assignments. Arrows marked "to the baths" guided them toward the gas chambers. SS personnel maintained calm, orderly processing. Anyone who panicked or resisted was removed quietly to avoid alarming others. The gas chambers themselves represented the culmination of deceptive design. Crematorium 2 and 3 featured underground undressing rooms with benches and numbered hooks for clothing. Signs in multiple languages instructed victims to remember their number so they could reclaim belongings after showering. The gas chambers featured fake shower heads attached to the ceiling and drains in the floor, maintaining the illusion until Zyklon B pellets were introduced through ceiling vents. Dr. Miklos Nesli, a Hungarian Jewish physician forced to work in the crematorium as part of Josef Mengelé's medical staff, documented the deception's effectiveness in memoirs written immediately after liberation. The people walked calmly into the gas chamber, believing they were entering a shower facility. They undressed completely, carefully folding their clothes. Mothers held children's hands. People chatted quietly about what work assignments they might receive. The Germans had perfected the lie so thoroughly that victims cooperated in their own murder until the moment the gas was released. Even then, many could not comprehend what was happening. The psychological sophistication was as monstrous as the murder itself. The deception served multiple purposes beyond preventing panic. It allowed small numbers of SS personnel to process thousands of victims. It reduced psychological trauma for German killers by creating emotional distance. They were merely guiding people to showers rather than personally murdering them. And it extracted maximum economic value before death. As victims surrendered, valuables, luggage, and even their hair after death, all collected for German use. The Sonderkommando, prisoners forced to operate the murder machine. The most psychologically devastating aspect of Auschwitz operations was Nazi use of Jewish prisoners to perform the actual physical labor of the murder process. The Sonderkommando, Special Squad, consisted of approximately 100 to 300 prisoners at any time who worked in the gas chambers and crematoria. Sonderkommando duties included guiding victims into gas chambers, removing corpses after gassing, extracting gold teeth and cutting hair from corpses, loading bodies into crematorium ovens, and disposing of ashes. These prisoners witnessed industrial murder daily, while knowing they faced eventual execution themselves to eliminate witnesses. The Nazis selected Sonderkommando members from new arrivals who appeared physically strong. They were offered better food, separate housing, and temporary survival in exchange for this horrific work. Most had no choice. Refusing meant immediate death. Philip Müller, a Slovak Jew who worked in the Sonderkommando for nearly 3 years and was among the few to survive, described the psychological horror in testimony recorded in the 1970s. "I witnessed the murder of my own people from my town, people who spoke my language. The Germans forced us to deceive them, to tell them they were going to shower, to help them undress, to assure them everything would be fine. Then we would close the doors and listen to their screams as the gas killed them. After silence came, we would open the doors and drag out the corpses of people we had lied to. This was not work. This was forcing prisoners to become accomplices in genocide. The psychological torture was as deliberate as the physical murder." The Sonderkommando lived in a separate area, isolated from other prisoners. They were forbidden to communicate what they witnessed. Every few months, the Nazis murdered the entire Sonderkommando unit and replaced them with new prisoners to eliminate witnesses who understood the full scope of operations. Despite knowing their fate, some Sonderkommando members documented what they witnessed. Zalmen Gradowski, a member murdered during the Sonderkommando revolt in October 1944, buried detailed notes in a tin container near Crematorium III. His words, recovered after liberation, provided testimony from the heart of the murder process. "We who worked in the crematorium saw truths the world cannot imagine. The Germans transformed murder into a production process with efficiency targets and quality standards. They measured success not in human terms, but in corpses processed per hour. We were forced to participate, forced to watch, forced to survive while everyone we knew died. I write this so the world will know. The Germans did not just murder bodies, they murdered souls, including ours. The selections, Dr. Joseph Mengele, and pseudo-scientific racism. The selection process at Auschwitz-Birkenau represented Nazi racial ideology applied with bureaucratic precision. SS doctors stood on the arrival ramp, dividing incoming transports into those deemed fit for labor and those selected for immediate murder. The selection took seconds per person. A glance, a gesture with a finger or cane, left or right. Dr. Joseph Mengele became the most infamous selector, though numerous SS physicians rotated through the duty. Mengele approached selections with enthusiasm that shocked even SS colleagues. Survivors remembered him whistling opera while sending thousands to their deaths, his polished boots and white gloves presenting a grotesque contrast to the horror he orchestrated. Mengele's selections followed pseudo-scientific racial criteria mixed with crude economic calculation. Children under approximately 14, except twins whom Mengele wanted for experiments, were automatically selected for death, too young for heavy labor. The elderly, the sick, the weak, pregnant women and mothers with small children, all deemed economically useless, went to the gas chambers. Only healthy adults aged approximately 16 to 45 might be selected for labor, and this represented temporary reprieve, not survival. Vera Alexander, a Romanian Jew who survived Auschwitz, described witnessing Mengele's selections after arriving with her family in May 1944. We stood in lines on the ramp, terrified and confused. An SS officer in an immaculate uniform approached my family. With just a glance, he pointed my elderly parents to the right, me and my sister to the left. We had no idea this meant they would die within hours, while we would enter the camp. The officer made life and death decisions with the casual efficiency of a factory foreman sorting defective products. Later, I learned his name, Mengele. He selected my parents for murder without even asking their names. Beyond selections, Mengele conducted medical experiments on prisoners that served no scientific purpose beyond satisfying sadistic curiosity disguised as research. He was obsessed with twins, collecting them from arriving transports to study genetic inheritance. Mengele performed surgeries without anesthesia, injected chemicals into eyes attempting to change their color, and conducted autopsies on twins he killed to compare their organs. Dr. Miklos Niesli, forced to assist Mengele, documented experiments that revealed the complete absence of scientific merit or medical ethics. Mengele claimed he was conducting genetic research that would advance human knowledge. In reality, he tortured children to satisfy his own curiosity. He would kill twins simultaneously to compare their organs during autopsy. He infected subjects with diseases to study progression. He performed amputations and other surgeries with no therapeutic purpose. This was not medicine. This was sadism, wrapped in scientific language to provide psychological justification for the executioner. The plunder. Extracting economic value from murder. Auschwitz operated not just as a murder facility, but as an economic exploitation center that extracted value from victims at every stage. Nazi Germany treated genocide as an economic opportunity, systematically stealing everything Jews owned before, during, and after their murder. The economic exploitation began at deportation points. Jews were required to declare all assets before resettlement. Real estate, businesses, bank accounts, securities, all were confiscated legally under Nazi racial laws. Victims were allowed to bring luggage containing personal belongings and valuables, which would be stolen upon arrival. At Auschwitz, economic exploitation reached obscene efficiency. An entire section of Birkenau called Canada by prisoners, named for the country associated with wealth, consisted of warehouses where prisoner workers sorted belongings stolen from murdered victims. Teams of prisoners worked 12-hour shifts processing luggage, extracting valuables, categorizing items, and preparing them for shipment to Germany. The variety of items stolen revealed the thorough nature of the plunder. Clothing was sorted by type and quality. The best items went to German civilians, medium quality to ethnic Germans in occupied territories. Poor quality was recycled into industrial fabric. Eyeglasses were collected, classified by prescription, and distributed to Germans needing vision correction. Children's toys were cleaned and sent to German families. Cooking utensils, tools, suitcases, blankets, shoes, all were categorized, inventoried, and shipped to Germany. Even human bodies were exploited for economic value. Gold teeth were extracted from corpses and melted into bars sent to the Reichsbank. Human hair was cut from female corpses and used in industrial textiles, particularly for waterproofing materials and fabric for U-boat personnel. Ashes from cremated corpses were used as fertilizer or landfill. Documents captured after liberation revealed the scale of theft. Between April 1942 and January 1945, Auschwitz processed over 1 million victims. Conservative estimates suggest the economic value of stolen property exceeded 180 million Reichsmarks at 1944 values, equivalent to approximately $2 billion today. SS Unterscharführer Oskar Gröning, who worked in the department processing stolen money and valuables, testified decades later about the systematic nature of the theft. Every item that arrived at Auschwitz was treated as German property. We counted money, weighed gold, inventoried jewelry, and recorded everything meticulously. The irony was that we maintained perfect bureaucratic records of theft and murder. The Germans wanted to be efficient criminals, organized murderers. We transformed genocide into an accounting exercise with double-entry bookkeeping tracking stolen valuables. The economic motivation intertwined with ideological hatred created an additional horror. Nazi Germany murdered Jews not despite their property, but partly because stealing their wealth enriched the state. Genocide became profitable, creating economic incentives that reinforced ideological commitment to extermination. The industrial partnerships, IG Farben, and corporate complicity. Auschwitz's role extended beyond extermination to include labor exploitation for German industry. The IG Farben Company, Germany's largest chemical and pharmaceutical conglomerate, constructed a massive synthetic rubber and fuel production facility at Auschwitz III, Monowitz, located approximately 7 kilometers from Birkenau. IG Farben invested over 700 million Reichsmarks in the Buna-Werke plant at Monowitz, choosing Auschwitz specifically because of access to slave labor. The company leased prisoners from the SS, paying approximately 3 to 4 Reichsmarks per skilled worker daily and 1.5 Reichsmarks for unskilled labor, far below free market wages for German workers. Conditions at Monowitz rivaled the RTO extermination camps in brutality. Prisoners worked 12-hour shifts performing dangerous industrial labor with minimal safety equipment. IG Farben supervisors and SS guards beat workers who appeared to slow production. Food rations were deliberately kept below subsistence levels. Medical care was non-existent. The average survival time for prisoners assigned to Monowitz was approximately 3 to 4 months before they were worked to death or became too weak for labor and were sent to Birkenau's gas chambers. Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist who survived 11 months at Monowitz, documented the industrial exploitation in his memoir, Survival in Auschwitz, written in 1947. IG Farben transformed prisoners into disposable industrial components. We were not workers, but consumable resources, to be used until exhaustion and then replaced. The company engineers designed production processes, assuming worker death would occur regularly, and planned accordingly. They calculated that replacing dead prisoners cost less than improving working conditions to keep them alive. This was industrial management applied to human beings treated as raw materials. IG Farben was not alone in exploiting Auschwitz prisoners. Krupp, Siemens, and other major German corporations established facilities near the camp or leased prisoner labor for their operations. These companies were not coerced into participating. They voluntarily pursued access to slave labor as an economic advantage. The corporate involvement added another dimension to Auschwitz's horror. This was not just Nazi ideology executed by SS fanatics, but industrialized murder integrated into corporate capitalism. Germany's business elite participated willingly in a system that treated human beings as industrial inputs to be consumed and discarded. After liberation, corporate records revealed the extent of complicity. IG Farben executives had toured Auschwitz, witnessed prisoner conditions, and understood the connection to the extermination program. They continued operations anyway, prioritizing profits over human life with calculation that matched SS brutality. The Hungarian action, murder at peak efficiency. The spring and summer of 1944 witnessed Auschwitz operations at maximum efficiency when Nazi Germany deported approximately 437,000 Hungarian Jews to the camp between May and July. This represented the largest and fastest deportation of any single Jewish community during the Holocaust. The Hungarian action demonstrated Auschwitz's capacity when operating at industrial scale. Transports arrived daily, sometimes multiple trains per day, each carrying 2,000 to 3,000 people. The SS had refined procedures over 2 years of operations, creating a murder system capable of processing thousands daily from arrival to cremation. The selection ramp operated continuously. SS doctors divided arrivals in seconds. Approximately 75 to 90% were selected for immediate murder. Deemed too young, too old, too weak, or otherwise unsuitable for labor. The condemned walked directly to the gas chambers, typically dying within 2 hours of arriving at Auschwitz. The crematorium capacity became the limiting factor. Even with 4 facilities operating continuously, burning approximately 4,400 corpses every 24 hours, cremation could not keep pace with gassing during peak periods. The SS resorted to burning corpses in open pits, constructing massive pyres where bodies were stacked with wood and doused in accelerants. The air above Auschwitz-Birkenau filled with smoke and ash. Prisoners working in the camp described the sky turning dark and ash falling like snow. The stench of burning human flesh carried for kilometers. Allied reconnaissance aircraft photographing the IG Farben plant in August 1944 inadvertently captured images showing the crematoria with smoke rising and crowds of people near the gas chambers. Dario Gabay, a Greek Jew forced into the Sonderkommando during the Hungarian action, described operations during this period in testimony recorded decades later. The murder never stopped. Transport after transport arrived. The gas chambers operated day and night. We worked in shifts removing corpses, feeding crematorium ovens, burning bodies in pits when the ovens could not keep pace. The Germans had perfected industrial murder. They processed Hungarian Jews with the efficiency of a factory producing consumer goods. Except the product was death, and the raw material was human beings. The Hungarian action revealed not just Auschwitz's capacity, but the complete integration of genocide into German state operations. The deportations required cooperation from Hungarian authorities, railroad scheduling across multiple countries, SS personnel coordination, and Wehrmacht logistical support. Murdering 437,000 people in 3 months demanded organizational capability that extended far beyond Auschwitz itself. By July 1944, when the deportations ended, due to international pressure and Hungary's partial withdrawal from cooperation, Auschwitz had murdered approximately 320,000 Hungarian Jews. The remaining deportees entered the camp as registered prisoners, most of whom would die from disease, starvation, or eventual gassing when they became too weak for labor. The revolt. The October 1944 Sonderkommando uprising on October 7, 1944, members of the Sonderkommando staged a desperate revolt, the only armed uprising within Auschwitz-Birkenau's extermination facilities. The revolt revealed both the courage of prisoners who knew their deaths were certain and the vulnerability of the murder system when victims fought back. The Sonderkommando had learned through smuggled information that the SS planned to liquidate their unit and replace them with new prisoners to eliminate witnesses. Facing certain death, approximately 450 Sonderkommando members decided to fight. The uprising began at Crematorium 4. Prisoners attacked SS guards with makeshift weapons, hammers, axes, and knives smuggled from work sites. They overpowered several guards, killing at least 3 SS men. Using explosives smuggled into the camp by female prisoners working in a nearby munitions factory, they destroyed Crematorium 4, blowing up the building and making it unusable. The revolt spread to Crematorium 2, where prisoners attacked guards and attempted to escape. Some succeeded in cutting through perimeter fences and fleeing into nearby forests, though they were hunted down within days. The SS suppressed the uprising within hours, using machine guns and reinforcements from surrounding SS units. Approximately 250 Sonderkommando members were killed during the fighting or executed immediately afterward. The remaining participants were tortured to identify accomplices, then executed. Despite its failure, the revolt demonstrated that even in Auschwitz's heart, resistance remained possible. The women who smuggled explosives, Rosa Robota, Ella Gertner, Regina Safferstein, and Esther Weick-Blum, were tortured for months to extract confessions, then hanged publicly in January 1945 as Soviet forces approached. Salmen Lowenthal, a member of the Sonderkommando who participated in the revolt and died during the suppression, had buried notes documenting both the planning and his motivations. His words, recovered after liberation, captured the desperate courage of men who knew rebellion meant death but chose to fight rather than passively accept murder. "We knew we would die. The question was whether to die as sheep led to slaughter or as men who fought their executioners. We damaged their murder machine. We killed several SS guards. We proved that even here, in the center of the extermination system, prisoners could resist. They will kill us for this. But we die, knowing we fought back." The evacuation, death marches, and final crimes. By January 1945, Soviet forces approached from the east, threatening to liberate Auschwitz. Soviet leadership faced a choice: allow the camp to be captured with its surviving prisoners as witnesses, or attempt to evacuate prisoners and destroy evidence. The SS chose partial evacuation and systematic destruction of evidence. Between January 17th and 21st, approximately 58,000 prisoners were forced to march westward toward camps inside Germany. The death marches, as survivors would call them, occurred in the middle of winter, with prisoners wearing inadequate clothing and receiving minimal food. SS guards shot anyone who could not maintain the pace. Prisoners who collapsed from exhaustion, who tried to escape, or who simply could not walk another step, were executed on the roadsides. Approximately 15,000 prisoners died during these marches, murdered by guards, succumbing to exposure, or dying from disease and starvation. Simultaneously, the SS attempted to destroy evidence of their crimes. They dynamited Crematorium 2 and 3, reducing the buildings to rubble. They burned documents detailing camp operations. They evacuated or murdered prisoners who had worked in the gas chambers and crematoria. Despite these efforts, the SS failed to eliminate all evidence. Soviet forces, advancing more rapidly than expected, reached Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, before destruction could be completed. They found approximately 7,000 prisoners too weak to be evacuated, massive warehouses containing stolen property, partially destroyed crematorium facilities, and documentation that had escaped burning. Primo Levi, among the prisoners too sick to evacuate, described the final days before liberation in his memoir. The Germans fled as Soviet artillery drew closer. They took with them those prisoners who could walk, leaving the dying behind. We who remained knew we might still be murdered at any moment. Then, silence. The guards were gone. We waited in our barracks, too weak to fully comprehend that we might survive. When Soviet soldiers finally appeared, we were liberated but not free. The physical imprisonment ended, but we carried Auschwitz within us forever. The evidence, documenting the undocumentable. Soviet forces entering Auschwitz-Birkenau discovered evidence that confirmed reports of Nazi atrocities that many had dismissed as propaganda. The scale of what they found shocked even hardened combat veterans. In the warehouses of Canada, Soviet troops found approximately 836,000 women's dresses and outfits, 348,000 men's suits, and over 38,000 pairs of men's shoes, all stolen from murdered victims. They found 7 tons of human hair packed in bags, ready for shipment to German textile factories. They discovered thousands of eyeglasses, artificial limbs, shaving brushes, and children's toys. The partially destroyed crematorium facilities revealed the murder process. Gas chambers with fake shower heads still stood. Crematorium ovens designed to burn multiple corpses simultaneously remained intact. Underground undressing rooms where victims were deceived before death showed the systematic nature of operations. Soviet investigators found documentation that camp administrators had failed to destroy completely. Transport lists showing arrivals numbered in thousands daily. Inventory records of stolen property. Personnel files of SS guards. Death certificates for registered prisoners, though these represented only a fraction of victims. Those selected for labor rather than immediate murder. Perhaps most significantly, Soviet forces discovered survivors who could testify about what occurred. Dr. Gisela Perl, Philip Müller, Primo Levi, and thousands of others could describe not just conditions, but the systematic murder they had witnessed. Unlike earlier Nazi camps where most evidence was destroyed and witnesses killed, Auschwitz's rapid liberation preserved both physical evidence and survivor testimony. The Soviet findings were documented in photographs, film footage, and official reports. When the world saw images of emaciated survivors, mountains of human hair, warehouses filled with stolen belongings, and crematorium facilities designed for industrial-scale burning of corpses, the reality of Nazi genocide became undeniable. Lieutenant Anatoly Shapiro, whose unit entered Barracks 14 on Liberation Day, attempted to describe what he witnessed in his official report. The camp is not a military installation, but a murder factory designed with industrial efficiency. The gas chambers, the crematorium ovens, the warehouses of stolen property all prove systematic extermination on a scale that defies description. I've seen death in combat, but this is different. This is death as a manufacturing process, optimized and refined over years. The Germans built Auschwitz not in a moment of passion, but through careful planning and continuous improvement of their murder methods. The trials, justice delayed and incomplete. After Germany's defeat, Allied forces confronted the question of how to prosecute the unprecedented crimes committed at Auschwitz. The scale of murder, over 1 million victims at a single location, created legal and practical challenges unprecedented in history. Rudolf Höss, Auschwitz commandant from May 1940 to November 1943, was captured by British forces in March 1946. During interrogation and at his trial before the Supreme National Tribunal in Poland, he provided detailed testimony about Auschwitz operations, construction, and the systematic nature of the murder program. Hearst displayed no remorse, treating questions about mass murder as inquiries into administrative and technical matters. When asked about the number of people killed at Auschwitz during his command, he estimated 2.5 million, though he acknowledged the figure might be inaccurate, as many victims were never registered. He was executed by hanging at Auschwitz in April 1947, on gallows erected next to the crematorium he had supervised. Adolf Eichmann, who coordinated deportations to Auschwitz from across occupied Europe, escaped to Argentina after the war. Israeli intelligence captured him in 1960, and his trial in Jerusalem in 1961 became the first major public accounting of Holocaust crimes. Eichmann presented himself as a bureaucrat following orders, claiming he never personally killed anyone. The trial revealed how industrial genocide required not just sadistic killers, but ordinary bureaucrats willing to organize mass murder with administrative efficiency. He was executed in 1962. Dr. Joseph Mengele escaped prosecution entirely. He fled to South America and evaded capture until his death in Brazil in 1979. His escape represented one of the most frustrating failures of post-war justice. Trials of lower-ranking Auschwitz personnel continued for decades. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trials of 1963-1965 prosecuted 22 SS members who had worked at the camp. Only 6 received life sentences. Others received prison terms ranging from 3 years to 14 years. Many defense attorneys argued their clients were following orders or claimed they had no choice but to participate. Oscar Groening, the accountant who processed stolen valuables, lived freely in Germany until public pressure led to his prosecution in 2015. At age 94, he was convicted as an accessory to the murder of 300,000 people and sentenced to 4 years in prison. He died in 2018 before serving the sentence. The legal proceedings, while important for establishing historical record, failed to deliver comprehensive justice. Most SS personnel who worked at Auschwitz were never prosecuted. Many lived long lives, some achieving professional success in post-war Germany. The companies that profited from slave labor faced minimal consequences. IG Farben was broken up after the war, but successor companies continue operating today, and no corporation was held criminally liable for participating in genocide. The denial. Confronting those who claim it never happened. Within years of Auschwitz's liberation, individuals began claiming the Holocaust never occurred or that the scale of murder was exaggerated. Holocaust denial represents not historical debate, but deliberate falsification designed to rehabilitate Nazi ideology by denying its ultimate crime. Deniers employ several standard arguments, claiming gas chambers were actually delousing facilities, asserting that Zyklon B could not kill humans efficiently, arguing that crematorium capacity was insufficient to burn claimed numbers of victims, and suggesting that survivor testimony is unreliable or fabricated. Each of these claims has been systematically disproven through multiple forms of evidence. The gas chambers at Auschwitz-Birkenau were designed specifically for killing humans with architectural features, sealed doors, ventilation systems, Zyklon B introduction vents, that serve no purpose for delousing. Chemical analysis of wall material from the gas chambers shows high concentrations of cyanide, compounds inconsistent with brief delousing use but consistent with repeated human gassings. German documentation, including construction blueprints, correspondence between camp officials, and SS orders, explicitly refers to murder facilities. Survivor testimony, while varying in details, demonstrates remarkable consistency in describing the fundamental operations: deportation, selection, deception, gassing, cremation, and theft of property. Testimonies from SS personnel, recorded during trials when they had no reason to fabricate, confirm survivor accounts. The number of victims can be verified through multiple independent sources. Transport lists show deportations to Auschwitz from across Europe. Population records from Jewish communities before and after the war demonstrate demographic catastrophe. German documentation, though incomplete, records enough details to confirm approximate victim counts. Perhaps most significantly, Nazi officials never denied the Holocaust occurred. They denied only their personal responsibility. Hess confirmed mass murder at Auschwitz in detail. Eichmann acknowledged organizing deportations. Lower-ranking defendants admitted participating but claimed they followed orders. Deborah Lipstadt, historian who has studied Holocaust denial extensively, explained the psychological and political motivations in her research. Holocaust denial is not an attempt to understand history, but to rewrite it. Deniers seek to rehabilitate Nazi ideology by erasing its ultimate crime. If the Holocaust did not occur, then Nazi Germany was not uniquely evil, and fascist ideology might be reconsidered. This is why Holocaust denial must be confronted not as historical debate, but as political propaganda designed to enable future genocides by denying past ones. The existence of Auschwitz, the systematic nature of its operations, and the murder of approximately 1.1 million people at the site are among the most thoroughly documented facts in human history. Denial represents not skepticism, but willful rejection of overwhelming evidence to serve ideological agendas. The legacy, lessons that remain urgent. Auschwitz stands in history not as an aberration, but as a warning about what becomes possible when industrial modernity, bureaucratic organization, and systematic dehumanization combine under totalitarian ideology. The murder factory that operated at Auschwitz-Birkenau for nearly 3 years demonstrated that genocide could be organized as an industrial process. The same rational planning, efficiency optimization, and technological innovation that built Germany's factories and highways were applied to mass murder, with results that shocked the world. Several lessons emerge from Auschwitz that remain relevant 8 decades after liberation. First, ordinary people can participate in extraordinary evil when authority provides justification and systems distribute responsibility. The SS personnel who operated Auschwitz were not uniquely sadistic monsters, but ordinary men who accepted ideological justification for murder and rationalized their participation through claims of following orders. Second, industrial and corporate institutions can become complicit in genocide when profit motive overcomes moral restraint. German companies voluntarily participated in a system that treated human beings as disposable resources because slave labor was economically advantageous. Third, bureaucratic systems can normalize atrocity through routinization and specialized division of labor. When murder becomes a process with procedures, schedules, and performance metrics, participants can avoid confronting the moral horror of their actions by focusing on technical details. Fourth, dehumanization enables killing at scale. Nazi ideology portrayed Jews as subhuman threats to be eliminated, not individuals with inherent worth. Once victims are dehumanized sufficiently, moral prohibitions against murder erode. Finally, genocide requires not just killers, but widespread complicity through action or inaction. The deportation of Jews to Auschwitz required railroad workers to transport them, police to round them up, bureaucrats to process paperwork, and ordinary citizens to either participate or remain silent while neighbors disappeared. The memorial site at Auschwitz-Birkenau preserves the physical evidence of these crimes. Over 2 million people visit annually, walking through the same gates that transported victims entered, viewing the same barracks where prisoners died of disease and starvation, and standing in the ruins of the gas chambers where industrial murder occurred. The preservation of Auschwitz serves multiple purposes. It provides physical evidence countering denial. It honors victims by maintaining the site where they died. It educates future generations about humanity's capacity for systematic evil. and it warns that the conditions that enabled genocide, dehumanizing ideology, authoritarian government, and widespread complicity remain possible if vigilance fails. Elie Wiesel, Auschwitz survivor and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, captured the enduring significance in his reflections written decades after liberation. For the dead and the living, we must bear witness. Not to transmit an experience is to betray it. Auschwitz is not simply history. It is a warning about what becomes possible when hatred is organized, when murder is industrialized, when ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil. The question Auschwitz poses is not just, how did this happen, but how do we ensure it never happens again? That question remains unanswered because the conditions that enabled Auschwitz, hatred of the other, authoritarian power, and moral indifference, persist in our world. The liberation of Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, ended the killing, but not the legacy. The 7,000 survivors found by Soviet forces carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. The testimony they provided, the evidence they preserved through their suffering, and the warnings they issued about humanity's capacity for evil remain relevant today. The chimneys of Auschwitz no longer smoke. The gas chambers lie in ruins. The railroad tracks that brought over 1 million victims now carry only tourists and school groups visiting the memorial. But the questions Auschwitz poses about human nature, about the fragility of civilization, about the ease with which industrial societies can embrace genocide, those questions remain unanswered and urgent. In the end, Auschwitz became Nazi Germany's most efficient murder factory, not through accident, but through systematic planning, technological innovation, and organizational refinement applied to the ancient evil of genocide. The Germans transformed murder from brutal violence into an industrial process, with capacity calculations, quality control procedures, and continuous improvement programs. The efficiency they achieved was real. Over 1 million human beings were murdered at a single location in less than 3 years. The murder process was refined to operate with minimal German personnel, minimal witness accounts, and maximum economic extraction from victims. The system worked precisely as designed, but efficiency in service of evil remains evil. The bureaucratic precision, the technological sophistication, the organizational competence, none of these transformed genocide into anything other than the deliberate murder of innocents. Auschwitz stands as testament to a terrible truth. Civilization does not protect against barbarism. Industrial development does not guarantee moral progress. Human ingenuity can be applied to murder as readily as medicine. The prisoners who survived to bear witness understood this. They dedicated their remaining lives to ensuring the world would remember, would understand, and would resist the forces that made Auschwitz possible. Their testimony reveals not just what happened, but what remains possible when humanity fails to learn from history. Soviet Lieutenant Anatoly Shapiro, who entered Auschwitz on Liberation Day, returned to the site in 1985 for the 40th anniversary of liberation. Standing before the ruins of Crematorium the Sühne, he spoke words that captured Auschwitz's enduring significance. When we liberated this place 40 years ago, we could not comprehend what the Germans had built. Now, after decades of study, we understand all too well. Auschwitz was not an accident of war or a temporary madness. It was a systematic program executed with industrial efficiency by educated people in an advanced society. This is what makes it so terrifying. If it happened once, it can happen again. The only defense is memory, vigilance, and moral courage to resist when others are dehumanized. Auschwitz teaches that civilization is fragile, that evil can be organized, and that ordinary people can become complicit in extraordinary crimes. These lessons remain urgent because the conditions that enabled Auschwitz, hatred, propaganda, and indifference, never completely disappear. The ruins of Auschwitz-Birkenau stand as physical evidence of what happened when Nazi Germany applied industrial methods to genocide. The testimony of survivors stands as human evidence of the suffering inflicted, and the legacy of Auschwitz stands as moral evidence that remembering atrocity is not sufficient. We must also prevent its recurrence. That is the final lesson from the liberation of Auschwitz 79 years ago. The gas chambers are destroyed, the ovens are cold, the SS guards are dead or imprisoned. But the capacity for genocide remains latent in every society that permits dehumanization, that values efficiency over morality, that organizes hatred into systems of extermination. Auschwitz became Nazi Germany's most efficient murder factory through the application of industrial methods to the ancient evil of genocide. It stands now as a memorial to over 1 million victims and as a warning that the same efficiency could be achieved again if humanity fails to learn from history. The question is not whether we remember Auschwitz, but whether we apply its lessons to prevent future genocides. On that question rests the meaning of those 1 million murders and the responsibility of everyone who knows what happened at that place.